What's up, everybody? We're back for another week of Head Kick Radio. Get ready to have the best week of your lives because Justin and I are going to get it started right if you're listening to this on a Monday. So, Justin, I have a big, important question to ask you.
What's going on, man? What's up?
What got you interested in martial arts, UFC, MMA? Like, what got you hooked? Was it a fighter? Was it a fight? Like, tell me about it.
So, for me, it's kind of like it's a weird story. I was, growing up, late 90s Attitude Era, I was a big WWF guy. I think it was WWF back then still. But, there was Ken Shamrock, and he was called the world's most dangerous man. And, excuse me, they had always kind of, talked about how he had been like a UFC fighter and stuff like that before. And that had always kind of struck with me a little bit, and I was curious about it. And then it was in the early 2000s. Now I don't remember when they fought, but I remember a good buddy of mine, my buddy Kyle, that we were actually at UFC 225 with. They were talking about how Ken Shamrock's going to fight this guy named Tito Ortiz, and I was like, "Who's this Tito Ortiz guy?" And then you start doing more research because he was my best friend, and I was over at his place all the time. And then we started watching videos, and they were cutting promos of like Ken Shamrock and this dude Tito Ortiz like talking smack to each other and stuff like that. And that was probably my first introduction into like the actual like UFC. Because truthfully, before that, I hadn't really heard of the UFC or like really known anybody or like about the UFC or anything like that, So that's kind of how I first got started and stuff like that. So what about you? What about you? What got you interested in MMA?
Probably what got me first interested in MMA is watching a lot of Chuck Norris TV shows, and I always wanted to do that. And so then I had asked my dad like, hey, what kind of martial arts does Chuck Norris do? Except who knows how I worded it because I was young, and he was like, oh, he does karate. So, of course, ESPN at the time had karate on. So I started watching it like that. But, like, I would say that's more subconsciously. I think what really got me hooked was the very first UFC I remember watching. I mean, I may have watched others, but it was the first Matt Hughes versus Frank Trigg fight.
Okay.
I can't remember the year.
Okay.
But, like, that's when I first noticed I started paying attention because I came up the WWF route just like you.
Okay.
And I like, the wrestlers' personalities. I was a big Rock fan. And Stone Cold, even though they were arch nemesis.
The Attitude Era was the best, man.
Yeah.
And
DX was amazing.
Yeah, and obviously you're going to be biased because that was just our era of wrestling, but, that. Anyways, sorry to cut you off, but I would agree.
No, you're good, man. And so I fell in love with, Matt Hughes. Like, I didn't have a favorite fighter, but, you just watch whoever did the best, and that was kind of be your guy, I guess, is how you'd put it. So Matt Hughes quickly became my guy. And then to hear that he was from Iowa, and he's just a farm boy, grew up in the same kind of lifestyle I did, except he threw a lot more hay than I ever did because that dude is yoked. And so, like, talking about the WWF, the reason that was relevant to this is because Tito Ortiz was like the mouthpiece for the UFC at the time, and everybody loves a good mouthpiece. It turns out, he was just a rude dude, I guess, in reality, just the way he talked to people and how he would insult their mothers and things like that. I was like, this is very WWE-esque, but it got him a lot of fans. But he was also a decent fighter and was a world champion at the time too.
Absolutely.
So I kind of liked him for a little bit just because, like I was saying, that you need that mouthpiece.
Right.
And that was definitely, I think, good for the UFC. And makes me wonder if he was like the first original trash talker in the UFC. What do you think it would be, Ortiz?
He would definitely have to be up there because, obviously, like I said, he was probably the first guy that kind of got my attention too, because I'm looking at it here, and Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock fought in 2002 and then twice in 2006. So, that was at the end of the whole Attitude Era and everything, but that was probably when I started transitioning over. But around that time, I mean, yeah, I would probably have to agree. I would agree that he was probably the mouthpiece of the UFC because, I mean, who was really, who would you say, like, was like would you agree with what you just said, that he was probably the face of the UFC at that point?
Yeah, I would say so because, like, it was him and Randy Couture always going back and forth. Of course, Chuck Liddell burst on the scene shortly after, if I remember correctly. So I started watching, I would say, about 2002, 2003.
Right, yeah, I think that was the first time. I would agree, too. And I love the name of it. Look at this. UFC 40 Vendetta.
See, I like when they used to name the pay-per-views.
Those were so cool back in the day. I don't know when they stopped doing that, but please bring it back.
Yeah, please bring it back.
No,
take that back. Now that I'm looking at Matt Hughes' record, the very first one I remember was the one in 2001 when he fought Carlos Newton and he slammed him because Newton had him in that triangle. I was like, oh, I remember.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
that
so
was that fight. That was
Frank Trigg.
That's on highlight reels to this day. Like, it's incredible.
See, looking at Hughes' record, I mean, he fought a while. He was 45-9.
45-9. Yeah, that's fantastic, man. That's awesome.
Do you think that the days of all these, superstar fighters that fighting, upwards towards 50 fights, do you think that's over?
Yeah, I mean, look at what happened. Look what has happened to Max Holloway. I mean, people are saying he probably got KO'd in like practice, or that's kind of like a loose rumor that's kind of out there. I haven't seen any like solid evidence there, but you hear it on enough things that you maybe start to think that there's some truth to it. But you look at that and like we've even talked about it before. Like, we don't think a guy like Justin. Do you think a guy like Justin Gaethje could even sniff 50 fights?
No, not the way he fights. No.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, like Mighty Mouse might be able to get there, just because he doesn't get hit. I mean, a lot of it depends on your style,
right?
And I'm not accusing Matt Hughes.
But I'm also talking like the contracts and stuff too. Like a lot of the champions don't want to fight more than twice a year now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, it seemed like they would fight 3-4 times a year.
Oh yeah, I mean, looking at right here, Matt Hughes fought 3 times in 2002. Twice in 2003, 3 times in 2004. So he was, 2 or 3 times a year even back then. So, I mean, I guess it's not that.
Well, even up to his most recent, like he was fighting, 3 times in 2010.
Yeah. I mean, I think those days are done, though. But see, the thing is with him is he avoided a lot of damage. Yeah. And I think a lot of that depends on that. That's why I brought up Mighty Mouse, because he doesn't really get hit a lot.
Well, think about like Cowboy Cerrone. Cowboy Cerrone trains, or he fights like 4 times a year. He takes quite a big amount of damage, I would say, like quite a lot. How can he do this and keep going? Like, is he CT City too, or like what's going down?
Well, he even said too that he stopped sparring in practice because he said, there's no need to take that unnecessary damage, I think I heard another one where what he meant to say was he doesn't spar like that when it gets closer to the fight, but early on in training camp, and then obviously out of competition, he spars all the time. He says like a few times a week. Okay, but yeah, man. I mean, I think those days of standing and banging are kind of over.
But I mean, really, because like look at guys like T.J. Dillashaw, who has that really nasty Dwayne Ludwig style of striking. Like those, I don't. He'll stand and bang with you, and he's a great wrestler and has some ground game.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't know. This is kind of, I don't know if this would be like a weird question, but do you think that any of that has to do with the fact that maybe it's like they're smaller guys? Maybe they, what I'm here, right?
Yeah, like the smaller guys don't have the knockout power that the big guys do, so they can take more shots from each other.
Yeah, but like a guy like TJ, though, he can obviously, or like Cody, Cody Garbrandt, of course, they obviously have the power to be able to knock people out, and Mighty Mouse, but, they haven't really been hurt besides that. So I don't know, would you think that has to do with anything or no?
Yeah, I think it plays a big part, but it's also like, talking to, just the longevity part of it and fighting 50 fights in a career. Like, I think Cowboy might be the only one who can do it that's fighting at this pace that's still, but he's an old school style dude. That's what I'm kind of saying here. I think that generation of old style fighters, they're dying. Like, it's going away.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that, because you got to think too, a lot of these guys too are just getting bigger and stronger and like more, you know what I mean? Like more athletic. Like, I mean, could you imagine what a guy like Francis Ngannou would have done in like the early 2000s? Like that crazy athleticism.
He would have done what
power.
Chuck Liddell did, if you ask me. Like Chuck, like that's all he had was his striking and wrestling defense. Like,
right.
You weren't taking him down.
No.
And then he'd just stand there and pick you apart because his striking was at another level.
Yeah.
Like especially the Couture's, who had great wrestling and great ground and pound, but he could rarely ever get Chuck there.
Right. Yeah, so looking at Cerrone now, he's at 44 professional fights. He's 33-11. I think he gets the 50, but yeah, I think
he's fighting in Denver.
He could be. Yeah, that's true. He could be one of the last ones, though. Like you were saying, I think he could be one of the last ones. So I don't know. So speaking of Cowboy,
I'll tie it back in. So talking about the first question of like what got you into to martial arts, UFC, MMA, whatever it is, and we talk about the WWF route. And so once I became a fan, what like hook, line, and sinkered me wasn't so much an athlete as it was a fight. And I think this worked for everybody because this is when the UFC blew up, was that Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonnar, Ultimate Fighter 1 finale. Like, once I watched that fight, I was convinced that that's it. This is my sport. I know little about it. You know, like I knew more about baseball and football and all that growing up than I did this. I was like, nope, this is it. This is what I want to learn. But it took me years to even go train after that.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with you because that fight, too, was one of the first fights that got me into, because once you saw that, I mean, to this day, that's talked about as one of the greatest fights in UFC history. It's still shown on, you know, these random UFC greatest 25 fight, you know, shows and stuff like that. That fight was just incredible. And then I actually got into the Ultimate Fighter after that. I think I remember watching like season 2 and season 3 and season 4, and was it season 5 with Nick? Or with Nate Diaz and stuff like that.
Yeah, I believe so. But see, I was in. Maybe that's why I like that fight so much, because I was in on the Ultimate Fighter from day one.
Okay.
Like every week I would watch the new episode. Yeah. So I was emotionally involved in that
back
one.
Was I don't think Spike TV was around then. What was it on back then? Was it? I don't want to get lost in thought there.
Yeah, I don't remember either. We'll have to look that one up. It was either Spike or because it was way before FX and all that. Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, we'll have to look that one up later.
Yeah, because I still remember these highlights that are still on to this day of just, you know, fights back in the day.
Maybe it was USA.
Maybe that's a fair call.
But yeah, so that fight really got me thinking, like, you know, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread is, you know, MMA and the UFC. And I've seen a few Pride fights, and at the time, and because I'd have buddies that would have DVDs and they'd show me. So like that was what was weird. I think that, you know, kind of planted the seeds in my head to like it, is they showed me that, but I didn't pay much attention. I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, that dude just beat up that dude and made it look really cool.
Right.
And later, you know, then finding Matt Hughes, and then, you know, watching the saga between Tito Ortiz and whoever leading into that Forrest Griffin, Stephan Bonnar fight. I was like, this is, you know, because like that was the whole thing that bummed a lot of us out as kids about wrestling, is it was fake. And then that's what I could hang my hat on at like 12 years old, 13 years old.
Dude, I remember when that came out, I was like, I don't know why I was so heartbroken, because I couldn't believe it was real. You know what I mean? It gets to the point where it was like, then you think about it, you're like, well, yeah, I mean, how can that be real? They're just kicking each other in the head and all this kind of crap.
I mean, like the things they do, they're so talented.
They are unbelievably athletic. I'm not taking anything away from professional wrestlers at all.
It's live theater at its peak performance.
It is phenomenal. You know,
just a bunch of fake fight scenes, but like, you know, a lot of that hurts, like especially when they're jumping from the cage.
Well, I remember back in the day when they would talk about like the razor blades, you like cut yourself to get the blood. I mean, Mankind, you're gonna tell me that stuff with Mankind was fake when he's getting thrown off Hell in a Cell, and
when The Rock was teeing off on him with those chairs.
With the chairs fake. And then getting slammed on tacks. Do you think that's fake? Come on now, son.
That's just awesome to me that people will like get paid to take a beating, like
for my entertainment. Yeah, for my entertainment, you're willing to get slammed through tables, get hit in the head with metal chairs, and slammed on tacks and thrown off cages. Like,
you know what The Rock says, for the millions and millions of The Rock's fans. You know what I mean? Like, everybody was in on that. We were saying it aloud, you know, at the TV with them.
My mom to this day won't let me throw away like my action figures. Like, I had easily 20-30 wrestling action figures. I had the ring, dude. I had it all growing up. That's
a good mother right there, not letting you throw it away. Like, no. I'm such a purger, and my mom doesn't stop me from purging everything, so I don't have anything from my childhood anymore.
Sorry to kind of take off your point there, but you were talking about Forrest Griffin and the Stephan Bonnar fight. Yeah. So what was your original point there? Sorry.
That fight, you know, sunk in this is my favorite sport. This is what I want to watch forever, and I don't think. I maybe missed a few pay-per-views, obviously, but all the free fights and stuff, like, I don't think I've missed many since I was at least 19, 20 years old, I can say for sure. So, you know, when I discovered it about 12, 13, watched it a lot, you know, like for a kid,
right.
I watched it as much as you possibly could because they didn't have, you know, the amounts of fights that they have now.
Right.
And a lot of them were pay-per-views. But I would say I consistently, once I started working and making my own money at 19, I started ordering like at least half the pay-per-views a year, all the big ones for sure. You know, watched all the Spike fights
Yeah.
and
Right.
all the free fights and stuff like that. And still today, like I have, Fight Pass. Like I don't miss these things. Like
Yeah.
if I can watch those ones later, I will. But if they're on FX and you have to watch them live, like I'll make a point to find a way to watch that fight, even if it's on my phone, on a date, having to go, take a bathroom break or something just to watch my phone, be like, hey, who's winning this main event right now?
Right.
Done that one a few times. And the lady's like, man, you're gone a while.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, that reminds me of, if it's a big fight and I just happen to find myself at an event on Saturday night, I'll find myself like getting on my phone and trying to find some kind of like live stream or update about like what's going on. Like I try not to miss it, as like if I can help it, but life happens, you got stuff you got to do, but it was hard for me in those early days. Like once, like you said, after that fight was when I was like super interested in it. Like, oh my God, like these guys are just in a war right now. This is phenomenal. It was hard for me to like consistently watch it, but I watched it as much as I could. When I watched it, I loved it. I mean, which like kind of brings me to my next question. Like, since that was kind of the era that got us into it, like, who are some of your favorite fighters that like you find yourself consistently trying to watch or consistently root for? Like, who?
Are we talking current ones, or are we talking from the
back
past?
in the day? Like when you first jumped into like watching MMA, any kind of combat sport, really. Who kind of kept your interest?
All right, yeah. So Matt Hughes was definitely that fighter. Like every the 3-4 times a year, however many times a year he'd fight, I would make sure I watched all those.
Okay.
And then I would say the Tito Ortiz, Chuck Liddell, like the big fights, and then always like whoever the heavyweight champion was at the time.
Okay.
Like most of the time, I remember. I think the very first one was either Rico Rodriguez or Tim Sylvia when I first started watching. So I would just be like, oh, those are some big dudes, not realizing I was every bit as big as they were, by the time I was in, my young 20s.
Well, yeah, right.
When I was a little heavier, I was like, oh, I'm, a 6'2", 6'3" heavyweight myself right now.
Right.
But I just look at them and look at me and I was like, yeah, I should probably work out more.
Yeah. How fun were those fights with like Matt Hughes, GSP, and Matt Serra? Like those three. Like how fun were those fights?
See, that was weird. Like, cause the first Matt Hughes GSP fight I watched, Hughes won, and I believe it was by submission of armbar or something. I can't remember exactly now. And I feel like that fight was my very first time experiencing GSP, and I feel like that lied to me right off the bat. So then when GSP goes on his win streak afterwards and gets the belt, and I'm like, wait, this guy just got smoked by Matt Hughes in the first fight. Like, how did this happen? And then next thing he loses to Matt Serra. I was like, oh yeah, he's not the real deal. And then he hasn't lost since. So like I've always been confused by GSP, and he's a big fan favorite. Obviously got the Canadian crowd and this and that. But my cousin, he's a diehard GSP fan, and so like after that, when GSP beat Hughes twice in a row, I think at the end, I think he's won 2 of the 3. I just couldn't say anything. I was like, yeah, you're right, And then it would just bummed me out. That was like the first time I had a broken heart for like a fighter just losing to people I thought he shouldn't lose to. It was Matt Hughes losing to GSP.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so GSP is on my list for sure as like one of the guys. And yeah, when he lost to Matt Hughes, and then crazy enough when he lost to Matt Serra and that crazy, like not crazy knockout. Matt Serra's a Hall of Famer, so he obviously is a very good fighter. But that was such a big shock when that happened. I remember that it was unbelievable. But GSP, like you said, came back, and those are the only 2 guys to ever beat him, and he came back and beat him. So
yeah, and then also when like Hoist Gracie, any of the Gracies would jump in and fight, like those superstar fights or whatever I guess you'd call them,
right?
Super fights of yesteryears, not of today's super fight era,
right?
And like Matt Hughes fighting Hoist was awesome, and then I want to say it was a couple years later, then he fought Henzo. And then they just called him like the Gracie Killer or something like that, because the Gracies are famous for their jiu-jitsu, and then obviously like 10th Planet now, and everybody's taken off. But
yeah, so another couple guys real quick that I watch is BJ Penn is my favorite fighter of all time. Like personally, like I know he's lost like his last like 6 fights or something like that. He's on like a crazy losing streak, but he will always go down as my favorite fighter. Just I loved his swagger, like. He was so confident in himself, and I mean, he lost to GSP twice. Lost to
I was gonna say like that was probably one of the biggest fights I ever remember, like getting hyped up for months out, because it was announced was GSP versus BJ Penn.
Yeah.
That to me is one of the biggest cards in my mind of all time.
Yeah, and it might be one of the more like important fights because how often now do you get like champion versus champion? I mean,
we just had Stipe
we did,
DC.
and I understand that, but like, and they're in talks to do like Nunes and Cyborg, and I understand that, but like, before then, like, I mean, can you really count Alvarez and McGregor? I mean, Alvarez McGregor, I guess, but that was 2 years ago, or whatever, like. But like that, and I don't even feel like it mattered that Eddie Alvarez was a champion. I feel like it was more they were fighting each other to see if Conor could win the 155 belt. It wasn't really like that fight didn't really seem to be about Eddie Alvarez. It was, can Conor McGregor win 2 belts?
But I think of it too as like past champions. Like think of it like this: Frankie Edgar, when he lost the 155-pound belt, like he fought for it a few times after that versus Benson Henderson. So if you think about it, that's champion versus champion. And then Frankie goes down and fights Aldo for the belt, champion versus champion, even though Frankie just didn't have the belt. Yeah. So champion to me, I guess, is just more than holding the title.
You're always a champion. Exactly.
Yeah.
You're always a champion once if you wear it, even if you only defend it, even if you win it and you lose it right away, you're always a champion. Like Miesha Tate, like she beat Holly Holm, and then she lost to Nunes right afterwards. Like, she'll always be a champion. We talked about Matt Serra. Like, you know what I mean? Matt Serra beat GSP, was champion. GSP comes back, beats him right away, and takes his belt back. Yeah, but Matt Serra will forever be a champion. And he beat GSP, arguably
that's what I'm
the greatest fighter
that was
of
a fight
all
too. Like, think about GSP versus Bisping. That's champion versus champion.
Exactly. That's fair
GSP
because
came off that 4-year layoff, didn't have a belt, but he left with a belt.
Hey, that's true. That's true. And then just real quick, one more fighter. I know we're trying to focus on one or whatever, but
no, I like how we can bounce around.
Chuck Liddell.
I love Chuck.
Chuck Liddell. Just because I feel like he was like the perfect guy to watch when you were first getting into it because of his highlight reel power.
Yeah.
He's just an easy guy to watch, if that makes sense. Because you know he's just standing, he's got that unbelievably long reach, and he's just got power. And he's just going to bite. I mean, of course, he has great wrestling defense and a wrestling background and stuff like that. So, you know, you're not going to take that away from him. But
I think there's a lot of great pioneers that really built this sport in multiple different weight classes. So
Chuck Liddell is absolutely one of them.
But I think a lot of it, you know, it should be. I think what's more important, I should say, is the rivalries. I think that's what really built, like, UFC specifically. Right. And made MMA interesting to a lot of people was the big rivalries. And I think a lot of it comes from that WWF style, like, you know, the Tito Ortiz having to be a mouthpiece. Of course, Ken Shamrock brought a little bit over, you know, when he came over.
I mean, well, speaking of rivalries, I mean, you had Tito Ortiz and Chuck Liddell getting ready to gear up for, what, 3, right? Tito Ortiz.
Oh, yeah.
Liddell 3. Well, and then you had Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell. Great rivalry.
But that's what I'm saying, like, when they all, like, those three guys or something in the top of each division, like, those are the great rivalries. It's kind of like, I'm hoping that for the, you know, we've talked a lot about the 155 division. I'm hoping that for Khabib, Conor, and Tony Ferguson. Yeah. Honestly, like, but I'd really like for it to be like a 4 or 5 way thing, so that way you can just keep cycling through all of these guys and have like Kevin Lee in there or Dustin Poirier.
I think you will, unless they find a way to create another weight class. I think it's gonna that division, and you hate to use the word stuck because it sounds so bad, but it is just gonna be just killer after killer after killer. I think that belt is gonna constantly be changing hands unless somebody just hits a groove or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, unless somebody gets on a, you know, goes on a tear. But yeah, I'm with you though. If you can get, you know, those 3 guys are just a consistent guys at the top, the cream of the crop, like, that doesn't seem to get very tiring. I don't know, at least not to me. But
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think that's what builds people's interest is the rivalries, and you need to have rivalries at every weight class. Plus, I think it brings out the best in fighters and this and that. So the rivalries, I would say, more importantly, got me into the sport and the love for the sport.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I would definitely agree with that. They definitely make the sport just more entertaining. Like, it's always nice too, though, when you get somebody like a Rose Namajunas who just isn't really into, like, talking smack. But you would probably say that Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she's beat her twice, but that's probably her rival. You know what I mean? Like,
no, because Joanna was a dominant champion.
And you don't need both sides, like, talking smack. You can be rivals, you know, because I don't think Randy Couture and Chuck Liddell were big smack talkers.
I mean, they talked a little bit, but it was, I think back then when people talked, it wasn't so much entertainment as they really felt that way.
Yeah.
So, when Couture or something was like, I'm going to kick the crap out of him, or, Liddell saying, I'm going to knock his, face off of his, skull.
Right.
So, like, I think they really meant that stuff. It just made for good entertainment.
Yeah.
But I think they actually truly meant it. Like, whereas when Joanna says, like, like, oh, I'm going to eat her soul or her heart or whatever she said.
Here
that was
the boogeyman and all that kind of crap. Yeah.
Like, that's just purely, like, value of selling tickets.
Yeah, and for the listeners, why don't you comment below, too? Like, what got you into MMA? Like, was it boxing? Was it, it doesn't have to just be UFC. Just anything. Boxing, Muay Thai. Jiu-jitsu, like who or what got you into MMA? Did you start as a kid? Like, that's what we want to hear. We'll share some stories if we get some interesting comments and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. Speaking of boxing, so my cousin and I, when we'd hang out, we used to watch a lot of old Mike Tyson fights.
So fun to this day.
It was, and I'm trying to remember, like, if we saw him like on ESPN something, and we were teenagers watching these, but we would hang out and he loved Mike Tyson, and I just like watching Mike Tyson knock people out. I just heard he wasn't a good guy, and he hung around Don King and all that. But dang, I would definitely put on the tape and watch him throw down.
Oh man, I'll go back if I'm just bored. I'll just Mike Tyson knockouts. Like, that's like scary power.
I used to play the video game Mike Tyson
Punch Out.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic game. And like, when did, I don't know, like, what kind of happened to boxing there for a while, do you think? Like, I don't know, kind of after the Tyson era and like the Holyfield, like, there was kind of like, maybe, what would you say, like a 5 to 7 year period where there wasn't really, that was when Floyd was building up his name and stuff like that, so he wasn't really a name yet.
Right.
And like Pacquiao wasn't really, I don't know, what would you say, late 90s, maybe around 2000 is when?
Yeah, I was going to say, it was around late 90s, early 2000s, and then the mid 2000s, it, had full-blown Floyd Mayweather, Manny Pacquiao.
Because I remember my dad and all of his friends, they would order Manny Pacquiao fights and stuff like that.
See, so my friends were the opposite. They'd order the Mayweather fights.
Yeah, right. So, it definitely started coming back, but, like, well, I don't know, if you had to guess, because you follow boxing more closely than I do, like, what, I don't know, what not sparked that, but why do you think that happened?
I think it's a lot of things. It's kind of like economics, or I guess to me it is economics. It's like fighters or fighting economics is, there's also the burst of the UFC onto the scene around that time too, which probably pulled some guys, like even Stylebender said, he was more interested in learning all facets of fighting instead of just one,
right.
And being the best boxer, even though he's done boxing matches, kickboxing matches, things like that. That I think the boom of that sport kind of hurt it too, with the influx of talent, and you just needed that person that was a great speaker like Floyd Mayweather to come along and make it interesting, because everybody wanted to hear what Ali and Tyson said. So I think that they just had guys that were just old school fighters. They just wanted to show up and throw down. They didn't really want to say anything to you. They didn't want to, push you on, at weigh-ins and make it a spectacle.
Okay.
And I think that honestly personalities changed it, because now if you look at boxing, it's rich, and you see all the podcast platforms, the social media platforms, the news platforms, that these guys get to get out there and then, like, air quotes, be who they are and say the things that people relate to, and just be like, yeah, that's my boy. And then you hear him talking, you know what I mean? Or my girl, right? Like, I don't want to make it sexist here. And then you're like, oh, I like that person. And then they have a personality, because nobody likes people, or some people like people that have no personality. But I would say the majority of us, the same ones that watch, WWF, the same ones who love the movies, same ones who love, creative things and shows. Like, those people like people that have personalities, because those people tend to have personalities.
Well, we want to be entertained. That's why we're watching it. Like, we don't want to tune in, and that's why for casuals they don't want to see, it's, to go back to the UFC here, they don't want to see a wrestler go in there and just take a guy down for 15 minutes and, hit him with short shots that are just, it's very hard to knock somebody out like that. That's not an appealing style to casuals, but I think, like, personality kind of absolutely helps with the sport, because like you said, you had Mike Tyson. He was this villain. Like, people thought he was a terrible person, but people still tuned in to how long is this guy going to last that Mike Tyson's fighting. Now it was Floyd Mayweather. is this going to be the person that's going to hurt Floyd Mayweather? Is this going to be the guy that finally beats Floyd Mayweather? Like, you know what I mean? And then you see what Colby Covington's doing. I don't like what he's doing, and I don't think that's how he is all the time, but he's selling himself, and look what happened. He's an interim champion now. Like, yeah, no, the personality definitely helps. I would agree.
Yeah, so that's what I'm going with. Like, that's what made the UFC interesting, was those rivalries that brought out the personalities. That's what, made boxing interesting again, and now it's at an all-time high because, like, the social media platforms, they're there for all these people to post whatever they want. So that's why there's so many stars. And then the heavyweight division is good. And when the heavyweight division is good in any fighting organization, like whether it's even just jiu-jitsu, karate, or whatever, like that brings people's attention because for some reason people love large human beings that can, knock each other out in a second.
Yeah. So one thing too that I don't know, I just kind of want to comment on, and this isn't an insult to boxing at all, but like the money that's still in boxing is crazy. Like it is, I mean, not crazy like a bad thing, but like the amount of money that like is still made in boxing, and it's just, I just feel like I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm more into the UFC or, more locked into the UFC scene, but like, I just feel like boxing is not getting, there's not much like notoriety or like, I don't know, like it's just very weird. But then you got Deontay Wilder talking about he was going to take a flat fee of $50 million to fight Anthony Joshua. And I'm like, $50 million? I'm like, holy cow, dude. Like that is, get your money. I mean, get paid, man. That is awesome. But man, some of those boxing numbers just blows me away. And then obviously you got to talk about Floyd and Conor. I mean, they were just printing money for that
did
fight.
you see that Floyd made, he was the top paid athlete on the Forbes list? Well, Forbes did an overall top paid, celebrity list, and Floyd Mayweather still beat out The Rock, he beat out everybody by a lot. And The Rock showed up like 5th on that list, and he's the highest paid actor.
And you know what Floyd did? He fought once.
Just shows you, once you build your brand and build your name, you can start your own company.
I love it. Get money, man. Get paid. That is amazing. But it just,
and that's what a lot of these young boxers with these personalities are trying to do. They're trying to follow in his footsteps. It's the same thing like in WWF.
Right.
Like the young stars would try to follow in the the stars like The Rock tried to follow what Hulk Hogan was doing for a little bit. Then, but once you get there, then that's when you put your spin on it.
I was gonna ask, do you think that's why the Attitude Era might have been so popular in the way that it was, because of you had all the smack talk, and obviously all the wrestlers were entertaining on top of that, but like, do you think that was because you had like the smack talk, like,
and all that it kind of crossed the lines a few times? You kind of want that, like, like the UFC and other organizations, they hate like at the presser when their fighters are actually getting in fights, but like we all joke about it, like, oh, that, how is that going to bring in more fans? For some reason it does, because then people are like, oh, these two really hate each other, like this is real. Or even in wrestling, you're like, I can't believe he said that, like that doesn't seem appropriate for television.
I mean, hindsight, we were upset at Conor for kind of messing with that New York card by throwing the dolly and everything, but look what it's doing to this Khabib and Conor fight now.
I think it makes it the biggest fight of all time.
I don't want to say easy, because I think it'd get like 2.2 million pay-per-view sales, but I think it's gonna be the highest selling pay-per-view like in UFC history. I think it hits 2 million views. Buys, I mean, sorry.
I don't know, like it's been a while since I've had 1 million. I would say maybe 1.5, but that's what WME is looking for. But you base that off of a lot of countries don't have to pay for pay-per-views. They get it on a free stream. So really, I think that's just what's America and a select few other countries that do a pay-per-view have to pay for it. So 2 million seems like a stretch for me, which I don't know why it's honestly not around 10 million.
But that just shows you, though, like you're saying, though, just kind of reiterating your point, like people who are kind of going outside the box to like do crazy things that other people aren't doing. Like Conor McGregor, when he steps inside the octagon again, whether he's fighting Khabib, whether he's fighting GSP, whether he's fighting whatever, it's going to be one of the biggest pay-per-views in history. One, because he just got done fighting Floyd Mayweather, and two, it's just, he's Conor McGregor. He's everywhere. He's at the World Cup. He's in New York throwing dollies at buses. Like he's always in the headlines. It's somehow he's always in the news somehow, and I actually just read something today that his lawyers are getting close to a plea deal in New York, so Conor avoids jail time.
Well, we all knew that was going to happen.
Well, of course, he wasn't going to jail, and he wasn't getting banned from the U.S., but like, That's coming. So I think before too long here, we might be getting an announcement that he's fighting Khabib. And how would it be ironic if it was in New York? Would you say?
No, I don't think that Conor's ever going to fight again in New York, just personally.
Right.
So I would think it's going to be in Vegas, if they don't fight in Russia. Like, let me paraphrase that, because that's where the fight should happen. And I think honestly, maybe that's why McGregor was there during the World Cup, maybe talking to Putin, be like, "Yo, if we make this fight happen, you guys got to keep me safe." Like, maybe like I thought about this. Like,
really?
Yeah. Like, what if that's why he was there? Like, and maybe the UFC had secret officials or something with them. Their international officials. Like, who knows? There could have been some behind the scenes stuff. Because
you got to think. I mean,
in Putin's control country, like, they're not if they don't want people followed like Conor, like, they make sure that the KGB makes sure that nobody's followed.
Right. Well, we'll see, man. It's gonna be interesting, but
yeah.
I mean, just look what all this stuff's been doing to them. Like, I mean, first it starts off with Khabib just talking to Artem Lobov. That's all it talks to, like, kind of confronting him a little bit. Sure, was he a little bit more aggressive? It all starts from there, and now this fight just keeps building, and building, and building, and building, and people are just basically more of, when's this going to happen, not if this fight's going to happen. It's like, okay, when is this going to get announced? When is the UFC going to roll out that first promo and announce this fight?
So
that Conor's back.
I think the UFC has very, very good potential. If they make this fight in Russia, it would be the biggest fight of all time by far.
Yeah.
And then you parlay that. So let's, the winner, either Khabib or Conor, fights GSP in Canada.
Yeah.
I think that then would be I think that would actually beat the record of the Conor Khabib fight, like GSP versus the winner, because I think we still underestimate how much value
GSP's selling power
GSP really has.
Well, especially in like a place like Toronto or something like that. Like, it would be insane. But they got to get the ball rolling though, because GSP's 40.
Yeah, well, he's like 38.
Yeah,
he's running out of time too. Yeah. But I think it would be. They need to do it early next year, like March of next year, May of next year.
Put that in.
So you got to fight. So Conor and Khabib have to fight before then.
Well, I think it happens before the end of 2018.
And then you have this huge stalemate between Dustin Poirier, Eddie Alvarez, Tony Ferguson, Kevin Lee. And that's exciting in its own right.
Maybe Pettis just throw himself back in that mix, maybe?
And maybe Pettis is back in that mix. Like, it's an
55
exciting time.
is in great hands right now.
But here's what I want to say is, like, all those guys talk. There's not a guy on that list that we did not name. Pettis would be the closest thing that doesn't really say much.
But I don't think he's dumb. I don't think. I mean, him and Chiesa were kind of getting at it a little bit before they fought. But we'll see.
Yeah, because I like watching the Twitter beef between Alvarez and Poirier right now. Like, they're like literally talking about murdering each other.
Well, how about this stuff with Covington and Nick Diaz saying, "I didn't know you could tweet from prison. The only thing you're good at right now is beating women." Like, dude, if you see either of the Diaz brothers, like, now, like, you're going to get attacked. Like, there's no, like, it doesn't matter if you have security with you. Do you think they're worried about security? Like, come on.
I don't think that's a good thing to say to those guys, because they don't care if there's a ring.
They don't care, and that's why we love them. That's why it doesn't matter if the Diaz brothers are champions or not. We just want to see them fight.
I was more worried for Covington when he talked trash on John Jones. I was like, if you think that this guy wouldn't come to your gym and train with you and beat the brakes off you, I think you're wrong. But, fortunately for Covington, John Jones is trying to get reinstated, so he's got to keep a good image.
Covington's saying that John Jones and his team are paying off USADA in the UFC.
Oh, you got to be careful.
It's getting to the point too where I'm starting to be like, dude, this is actually kind of entertaining. Like, I just want to see him fight all these guys that he's talking shit to now. Sorry, maybe throw the expletive tag on there because
that's good. No.
But
the past guests who've been dropping like 50 of them, those are the ones that get them. If you drop one or two, I might not put them on.
But yeah, man, it's gonna be great. It's the UFC's. Some people talk about how viewership might be down a little bit, but I think they're gonna have a good end of 2018 / early 2019. There's good things on the horizon, man. I'm excited. And boxing's coming. I mean, I know you got Anthony Joshua fighting that guy from Russia and stuff like that, but you would have to think that Wilder fight's happening sometime soon.
Well, Joshua's got a fight in September versus somebody else, and I think Wilder's trying to find somebody.
Well, Wilder even threw out on Schaub's show. He threw out that what about Miles Fury, or not? You know what I mean?
Tyson Fury.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I would like to see that, like, because that's why I'm saying boxing's good. Is they have 3 guys that legitimately could all be champions. Well, even more honestly, but like those are the top 3 right now.
Well, and then you talk about the Charlo brothers.
Yeah, they're way lighter. They're like 156 pounds and 165. But the Charlo brothers, like, they're very entertaining. They're very good. Mm-hmm. You still have like even people who've been around a while that are fun to watch. Like fight the Charlo brothers and Austin Trout. You have
Pacquiao's coming off a big win.
Yeah, Pacquiao just knocked out a dude.
Yeah. So, I mean, and I think, I don't know. And
Floyd
Floyd's always
will fight
out
anybody
there.
at any moment.
If somebody builds his name up enough, and then we've got Triple G, Canelo coming here pretty soon. So, I mean,
exactly.
Boxing's...
And then, you got Garcia who's tearing it up, and he's got a fight with, what's that guy's name? Easter, I think.
Yeah.
Easter Jr.
Combat sports are in a good place right now, man.
Yeah.
It's very entertaining. I mean, there's almost something going on every weekend. It's great, man. I love it. And I'm glad that I get to sit down and talk about it with you, man.
Yeah, man. It's always fun. I want to say, so I went to Callan and Schaub.
Yeah.
Well, for Callan's special. And so Schaub opened up for him, and it was right after the Eskimo Brothers thing. Schaub already has jokes on stage about it, and they are good. So good. Not even kidding.
Does he hint at like who he was referring to?
No, like we know who he was referring to, but no, he was just like the whole part of like first 5 minutes of his stand-up was blasting Dana White. I don't know if it was that long, but it was a solid couple minutes. And
That's
then
awesome.
The Eskimo Brothers things, and then like so he does like Schaub did like 30 minutes, and then so he goes off to announce Callan, and as he's walking out, and he used to be like, he'd have like a short saying. Well, now it's it's like, see ya, Eskimo brothers. And then he's running with it, and it's the funniest thing I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, they were, man. And I wonder what he meant when he said, this is the final warning.
I think he has some things on Dana. Like, there was a piece out that Josh Thompson, he was talking about, like he knows fighters that were champions that were all of a sudden no longer in the UFC because Dana would be hitting on their woman, and they would like call him out on it and like cause a scene, I guess, backstage. Just never made it publicly. And so then Dana would be like, oh, if you don't like it, you're out of here, kind of thing. Like, that's what he was hinting at.
Okay.
And so apparently and supposedly, like, even after like some of the UFC fighter legends like retired and started working for the UFC, like he would still make moves on their women or women they're interested in that he's interested in, and then all of a sudden they don't have jobs anymore. He said like people were losing jobs that had done a lot for this company just because Dana, was hitting on their woman.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know any of that.
And then I also read another piece that I want to say BJ Penn's writer, Taylor, I think's his last name, I can't remember. He put up, and I'm sorry if it's not him, but I think he put up an article that talked about that and talked about what Schaub said, talked about what Thompson said, and then even said like his mom, like in a book or something, wrote that Dana is a dog to women and she wishes he wasn't like that and has asked him repeatedly to change his approach and how he treats them.
Wow.
And that was just like, and that was taken from years ago. And then so it got thrown back in the mix with this. Like, people are just saying, Dana's not a good dude. And, you've heard like Schaub and everybody say, like, if you got Francis Ngannou, you shouldn't build him up and then trash him just because he's lost a couple in a row and hasn't looked good. He's like, no, he could still be good, especially in the heavyweight division where it's not that deep. Just help get him right. Yeah.
Fight.
Yeah. Talk him up still and help get him right. Like, get somebody, it's like, find help for him.
Yeah, wow. So I didn't know any of that. You just dropped some knowledge on me right there, man.
So
that's crazy. I mean, of course, like you said, we all kind of knew who he was referring to.
Yeah, but I want to say like that's all allegedly. Like, this is just things I'm reading.
Yeah, I hope that allegedly tag on there.
And I know I got to because I hope to work for Dana White one day in the UFC. So I do want to say that. Like, I'm not bashing him. I'm just regurgitating the Hollywood gossip out there. Probably not good on my part. But anyway, I just want to say it made Schaub's stand up so funny.
I want to see some of his stand-up. I've actually never seen any of his like stand-up material, and he's obviously selling out places.
I've seen him 3 times live now, and I'm blown away every time I see him.
Yeah, I wanna get on that and, you know, check him out and stuff like that. But it was a good show though.
It was really good. But
good,
Callen,
man.
like the thing is, people got to understand about Brian Callen is his comedy is a lot different. It's kind of political, not like in the Democrat Republican sense, even though he name drops those a few times. But it's more of like how to treat women, the whole movements, and like how it can be kind of confusing to different groups of people. Like it's when he does his bits, and like he's got a lot of funny parts in it. The way he spins it, just because it's obvious, but he looks at things from like both angles, or you know, or 4 or 5 different angles, and then just gives you things to think about. So like even in his stand-up, he kind of drops knowledge on you. So, and I mean, at least just to get you thinking about different things, you're like, yeah, that it's funny because it seems that way, and could actually just be that way. But then here's how, you know, somebody else interprets it, and then he puts a punchline on it, and you're like, oh, that's funny, and that's kind of true too.
Right. And
it's just wild once you just start wrapping your mind around how he speaks. You're like, man, he's really trying to say something here. It's not just a stand-up show just to make you laugh. Like there's a message in there.
Yeah.
And it's different than Chob's comedy. It's different than Rogan's comedy. It's different than Bill Burr. It's just different.
I mean, that's why he's good, because he's got his own style. You know, it's if you did what everybody else did, then you know nobody would ever be famous. So
yeah, he moves around less on stage now.
And I love that he didn't get started on Mad TV, but he was on Mad TV, and I will go to my grave saying I enjoyed Mad TV more than I enjoy SNL.
I'm one of them with you. I was a big Mad TV fan growing up, and I think that's just our generation.
Yeah.
But SNL is still good.
SNL is still very good. It's still got some very good stuff, but I was always like a Mad TV guy, and that was my first introduction to Brian Callen.
Yeah, I like the guy. So yeah, I just want to tell you, like, the Eskimo Brothers thing is already a bit. Next time
they're back in town, man, we'll have to, you know, even if they're doing the Fighter and the Kid, like something like that, man, we got to check it out.
I think now that they both hit it big, like separately too,
it's
like
gonna be less and less.
Well, they'll travel together maybe and do shows, but it's not going to be like Fighter and the Kid stuff. Like I went to one of those and that was really fun. I think now it's just more going to be like their own stand up. They may be on the, you know, at the same venue the same night, but it's not going to be Fighter and the Kid.
And like you said, like Schaub's got his Showtime gig, and you know he's doing his thing. He's doing the Big Brown breakdowns.
He also announced that season 2 is approved by Showtime for his Below the Belt.
That's awesome, man. Maybe you're dropping some knowledge on us that people shouldn't know. So
yeah, since I don't have a huge following, I don't think he can just roast me.
No, I'm just kidding, man. That's awesome, and I'm glad you had a good time. That's awesome, man.
It's kind of why I'm a little hoarse today, because I was cheering for him because it was funny, and you know I was howling over there laughing so hard. And
it's all good. It's all good, man. It's, you know, it's just one of those weekends too, man. It's dreary, rainy. Not too many. It's a good day just to kind of chill.
Yeah, that it is. All right,
day to recover. All right, brother.
Let's wrap this up. This is Head Kick Radio episode whatever we're on.
10.
No, we're past 10.
Oh, yeah. No, this is... Yeah, never mind. Whatever episode this is, I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah, this is a banked one. So if you're hearing this, just know that we recorded this.
Yeah. This could be... Some of this could be old news, so kill us.
Hopefully it's in the year 2018, but I'm sure it will be. I'm just giving it a hard time. Anyway, Justin, what are we?
We out.